9! The border guard shouted as the rain ran down his face. James Bell wished that he had at least learned a little German before leaving, so that he could understand something of what the border guard was shouting. The only thing he got out of the conversation was no, and again no. The intelligence service had drummed in him that he needed to keep calm, and that patience was the most important quality. As a doctor, he had learned both. At that time, it was about treating patients and not spying on terrorists, which is what he was now in West Berlin to do. James leaned over the sink and looked out the window. He was standing right next to the entrance of the small cottage on the border with East Berlin. His hands gripped the bench and his fingertips ached. While keeping an eye on Delia, he went through the protocol. Find out why she's going all the way to Russia, why she was at risk of being discovered, and most importantly, what the organization was planning. He would also have to accompany her all the way to Russia. The anti-terrorist cell, headquartered in London, was sure that the terrorists were planning something big. One of the possible targets was England. All previous attempts to take Delia in had failed. Instead of arresting her and risking her escape, it was more important to stop the impending attack. She and a handful of her friends were the terrorists' strongest weapons, trained in East Berlin by her father. Out in the courtyard, there were about 20 soldiers with heavy rifles over their shoulders. Everyone stood still. James's gaze drifted between the guns, and in his mind he heard the firecrackers as they were fired. He got phantom pains in his leg from an imaginary bullet. The sky cracked open and the last drops fell. The guard in the shelter stopped screaming. A calm set in as sunbeams penetrated the cloud cover. The group Delia and James traveled there with was doctors across the border. All 12 participants now stood huddled together and either did the same as James, looked out over the courtyard, whispered to each other, or sat silently. Alfonso didn't say a word. There was a sweet and pungent smell. Both the walls and the floor had mold stains. Doctors across the border were to get to a field hospital south of Belgorod, in the southern parts of Russia. James took a few breaths and collected himself. He released his grip on the sink. It was pure madness that someone without the slightest experience of real work in the field should carry out this assignment. The explanation was that there was no one else. Delia was his girlfriend, and if Pilcher had put any real agent into the group, no matter how deeply undercover he or she was, Delia would have known about him or her. As soon as they entered East Berlin, she would have been gone. He was the joker in the game, the last hope. If she disappeared again, all possibilities of stopping the attack disappeared. Delia was standing at the other end of the room talking to Roz. Who Roz could be, no one had had an answer to, even though the intelligence service had been given several months to find something. James could guess that it was also a cover name. Possibly she belonged to the same group as Delia. As far as he knew, there could be more members who had infiltrated the doctor across the border. He wished he had brought the camera he had used in Salisbury with him, the one he photographed Delia with. Although he had been able to photograph Roz, there was no way for him to convey the photographs to England. Delia came towards him, and her fitted coat made James's whole face heat up. She pressed her body against his back. "I have to go and fix something." Her hands caressed his stomach, and he moaned. "What should you do?" he thought. "Can you cover for me and Roz?" asked Delia, resting her head on his shoulder. "We'll be back soon." "What happens if they let us in?" he asked, looking at Delia. She shook her head. "Tonight at the earliest. As usual, things need to be reviewed again and again. Trust me, things take time." She kissed his neck and whispered, "It's fast." He looked at Roz and promised Delia to wait. She pressed herself harder against his back and then let go. Then she took Roz with her towards the exit. James explained to Alfonso, the founder of Doctors Across the Border, that they were going out and stretching their legs. The asphalt was wet and the water splashed up over James's pants. In addition to the small cottage, there were 2 watchtowers, one on the west side of the border and one on the east. Facing the street that Delia had turned up on, there was a larger building that James had seen several of the guards enter. Outside the entrance, there was a sign with a black eagle over a yellow shield. He guessed it was some kind of storage room or restaurant. None of the soldiers, not even those who were standing near the cabin, cared that James was walking away. Even before he reached the street, Delia and Roz had turned.